pays off its own interest. Oh, that explains it. That's why I said it.
Yeah. It's so high.
Property Group, eles trabalham também, muito com investimento, trabalham com property management. Pessoal chegando de Nova York, vem lá.
Yeah, the next, oh, the next one.
The tax plan. Let me show this.
No modifications. No.
You can do it. It's not. We're waiting a little bit. If you want to, go ahead and take a look at the assignment or the presentation for next week and read over that, and then start, go ahead and start working on that while we're waiting a few more minutes.
No, no.
get started here in a few minutes. Once again, go ahead and take a look at the details for your individual assignment presentation for next week, the handout, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. If you want to, we'll start working on it.
Just reading this, it says whatever, the presentation is 10% of your final grade, so are the quiz and test grades, that's 90%?
As per the syllabus.
Yeah.
Yes. It doesn't cost anything, it's easy, it's a little bit straightforward. All right, so
One like this is doing a bad free though. They're both getting jobs.
okay, we're going to talk about the individual presentation slash project that's going to be due next week, but first we're going to go ahead and do the new material, do the quiz, and then that will give us enough time to kind of focus on that at the tail end. Okay, so we finally made it to the last chapter, okay? This is the last quiz. I know you're excited.
Definitely.
Especially Pam. Okay. So this quiz and the chapter got a few little conceptual questions and a few little computational questions. All right. So one of the first things, and we've I think talked about this before, that when you're doing land development specifically, and you're doing raw land development, in many cases, you're having to comply with local land use regulations as to the number of, let's say, units that you can place on an acre of land and that sort of thing. And so one of the measures that, and I was very proud of you whenever Pike Riley came in, that you actually remembered how many square feet are in an acre. So that is an important number to remember. So once again, how many square feet are in an acre? 43,560 square feet equals 1 acre of land. Okay. Now, one of the things that, as I said, local governments tend to do is they, as part of their sort of their land use guidelines, and those of you that have probably taken the land use planning class, which is many of you, I'm assuming that you guys probably talked a little bit about sort of density guidelines in terms of, from, that in one particular location, depending on what kind of product that you're developing, like if you're developing, garden style, multifamily residential, there's a different sort of density requirement than there is for, let's say, high-rise residential versus single-family residential and so forth, so on. I'm assuming you guys talked about that kind of stuff in the land use planning class. Now, so in here, just a real quick sort of calculation. Let's assume, okay, how many, let's say, apartment units total would you like to build? Give me a number.
20.
20. Give me a higher number.
100.
320.
Around them.
In 1 acre, you mean?
No, just how many total would you like to build?
150, yeah.
Okay, I like a higher number. 350. All right? So you want to build 350 apartment units. All right? And the density requirement for the city is 20 units per acre. Okay? So, simple question. How many acres of land do you need? More than one.
17.5.
Okay.
17.5.
In this case, 350 apartment units, and we can do 20 of those per acre. So you have 17.5 acres of land. Okay, and in this case, let's just say, what if I asked you then how many square feet of land would that be?
You will multiply that by 45 by 46 by 50.
43,560.
43. 46.
And if land was selling at $5 an acre, I'm sorry, $5 per square foot. My bad. $5 an acre, that'd be a heck of a deal.
Wow.
Major swampland. Okay, 762, 300 times 5. So $3,811,500 for your land cost.
That's $5 an acre, that's what this?
$5 per square foot.
Oh, square foot.
I said acre, I meant square foot. Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, moving forward. Okay, one of the topics and concepts that you need to be familiar with as a developer is sort of the build-to-suit sort of product type. And what we mean by build-to-suit is that you have an actual tenant in mind. Now this could be, once again, for residential or for commercial, okay? It could be, once again, it could be an industrial project, it could, but in essence, you've already got a client, you've got a tenant, you've got somebody that you're actually building the product for, okay? Now, if that's the case, that's different from kind of the whole colloquial kind of build it and they will come sort of model, in the sense of, you build it and you just sort of hope that there's a market out there for a product and that you're going to end up populating it with whoever happens to show up and sign a lease, okay? And in those two different approaches, one would expect that there's a lot more risk in that whole kind of, build it, they will come, in other words, the spec building, okay? Speculative building, than there is with the build-to-suit. The reason I'm kind of, going through this is, if you can capture a tenant up front for a property in a build-to-suit situation, chances are you could, if you chose to, as a developer, probably give them a better deal because you know that you're going to probably lease it immediately upon getting your occupancy permit, okay? Versus speculative building, the project could very well sit there after it's completed, after you've got your occupancy permit for several months before you finally find the tenant that's going to be appropriate for that space. Plus, you know, the whole spec construction thing, I mean, you know, you really are banking that you're going to find a tenant. And your lender is willing to somehow accept that as well, that, you know, there's going to be that magical, you know, tenant that's out there that's going to be, you know, waiting to populate the space. But the point of what we're sort of focused on here, kind of from the finance point of view, is really, are you willing, or how much of a discount might you be willing to give under kind of a build-to-suit sort of environment versus sort of spec construction? Does that make sense conceptually? Okay, so how do we kind of begin to operationalize that? Well, what I would tend to sort of say is that, let's say that it might take you 12 months to lease up a property versus being able to have immediate occupancy with a build-to-suit tenant. All right, so if that's the case, let's say that first of all, how big of a project do we have? Square footage.
10,000.
Okay, 10,000 square feet. All right, if we've got 10,000 square feet, and let's assume that the market rental rates are what per square foot per year? $25. All right, and how long of a lease might we do?
4.
Okay, so is that going to be for the spec tenant or for potentially the build-to-suit tenant?
Yes.
Okay. So a 4-year lease for the build-to-suit and a 3-year lease for sort of a spec tenant. Okay. Now, under those conditions, let's say, what sort of a discount rate do we want to apply? Let's say 5%. And the cash flows that we get from the build-to-suit tenant, simply put, you're going to have year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. So you're going to get on the build-to-suit, you're going to get whatever those cash flows are for each of those 4 years. But for the spec tenant, you're going to get $0 for the first year, and you're not going to collect rent until years 2, 3, and 4. Does that make sense? Okay, yep.
I have a question though. But if you are building a spec kind of complex, right, to rent out, wouldn't that be like there'd be no delay as soon as you purchase the land, you kind of know what project is going on there. In retrospect, you build a suit, then you have to wait till you find a client that wants to give you his archetype or his plan of what he wants to build it. Wouldn't that be the same kind of, you know? Because if you see a lot of signs that's built to suit on the land, that they're waiting for someone to come there to take over the land, right? So that
In some cases, yes.
in some cases it'd be the same thing almost in the spec, and you might get more, like you might get a quicker tenant in the spec than you would get in the build suit, you know, right?
One could make that argument, but you also don't have the capital commitment with the build-to-suit that you do with the spec tenant.
So you're losing value if you're not building it.
You're losing value, but that holding cost may not be that much of the land. So, I mean, you know, you can look at, I mean, once again, it's a valid assumption, but, you know, there are a variety of different ways to look at it. I mean, there's you know, I really haven't investigated it, but I see it every single day. Over here, right off of Davie Road, there was a new industrial project, a warehouse project, massive, you know, industrial warehouse building, and it's brand new, hasn't even been fully completed, and it's spec. Go sign the front window for lease.
Right.
I was shocked. I mean, I was like, somebody actually built that, you know, without potentially having a tenant in mind, or the tenant they had in mind fell through, or, you know, whatever. It was sort of surprising to me, except, you know, when you do think about it, there is a pretty substantial demand for industrial property.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, the location where it's at is also sort of questionable. But anyway, but my point being is, you know,
You can do both.
you can do both, but it's just, it's a question of, from an analytical point of view, if we're sort of looking at it, you know, and here are kind of the trade-offs, this is part of what we've got to sort of consider. All right, so in this case, and we assume that the market rents are gonna stay at the $25 a square foot, let's take a look at what the actual cash flows would be here. Okay? So 25,000, basically, yeah, so $25 times 10,000 square feet, so 250,000. Over here, let's just sort of start with this. I'll make some adjustments to this, but I just want to kind of. So this is kind of what we're sort of saying, if we were to charge them the same amount, okay, in terms of the base rental. Okay, everybody comfortable with that? Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to look at, well, what is the present value of those two sort of scenarios? The build to suit versus the spec using that 5% discount rate. So it becomes a cash flow, okay? Or you could set it up as an annuity, but it gets complicated because of the first year being 0. So what you're going to in essence do, one payment per year. You're going to, and for the build to suit, it's going to be 0 as the initial cash flow, and then 250,000 as a cash flow for 4 years. So 4 shift in sub J. And then you're going to have 5% as your interest rate. And then you're going to solve for what is the net present value. Okay, so start with that. Okay. And then for the spec, you're going to have 0 for the initial cash flow, but you're also going to have 0 for cash flow for year 1. Then you're going to have 250,000 as a cash flow for 3 years at the 5%. I must have done the first one wrong.
Yeah.
Something
86, 46.
like most of what it probably should be.
I'm sitting here driving myself crazy. You know? I can't get that fucking number.
Well,
86, 47.
Okay. So let's just start out and just look at the simple difference between the two. So 886, 487, 63, minus 648, 392, 39. Okay. So roughly 238, 095, 24. Okay. An absolute difference in the discounted value between the two. Okay, does everybody see that? Okay.
Does that mean that's the discount?
Well, that's the dollar value of the present value of the discount. Okay. So, in this particular case, how much of a rental discount could you offer the build-to-suit tenant up front in dollars per square foot per year to be equivalent to the speculative tenant?
The difference.
Yeah.
The difference
What?
between the two.
So the
difference
difference
between-
divided for the square foot.
You're looking for a payment, right?
The two LPVs, the difference.
If you just divide 886 by 648, you'll get it.
No, rest. Subtract.
Give us much.
86 minus 848, 648, and then plus
You take the two.
As much as two.
aggregated. Okay.
Okay.
Discount.
So this is the present value of the discount, all inclusive up front, okay? But if you remember, what we've got to do is we're gonna have to basically take this amount, put it in at 5% for 5 years and solve for payment.
Will be monthly? Well,
No, because it'll be annual.
why 5 years?
Because we're gonna, this is the present value savings
Okay.
up front, so we've got to spread that savings out over the entire term to adjust the rental rate. So 1 payment per year,
That's present value.
we're going to take the 238, 095, 24, put that in as present value over 5 years. Oops, not 5 years, 5%, is what I was trying to say. 5% interest rate over 4 years. And then solve for payment. So that would be 67,145.67. That would be the annual discount, but we want it per square foot. So we have to divide that by, how many square feet we said we had?
10,000.
So $6.71 per square foot per year. So in essence, what we're saying is that if the rental rate, the stated rental rate, or the market rate is $25 a square foot, we can give them a $6.71 or $6.71 discount per year, which means that really what we're saying is the actual rental rate that they would be charged would be like $18.29. But if I'm asking just for the discount piece, that would be the answer. Does that make sense?
And in the question, did you say 4 years? That was the,
Well, you've got to make it equivalent.
oh, okay. Okay.
So if you ask for the total amount, it's 18, and if you ask for the discount is 6.7.
Correct.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, in other words, if the stated rental rate is $25 a square foot, and we're giving them, we're knocking $6.71 a square foot off of that, then the actual amount that they would be paying us would be $18.29. This is a question of what I'm going to be asking, whether I'm going to be asking for the discount or I'm going to be asking for the effective rent.
Anything?
So
I think you can figure it out.
the full
Okay.
price is $25 and the effective rent is
Correct.
$18.29.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Moving forward. Okay. Here, the next one deals with construction draws. In this case, this is my opportunity to prove, or you to prove to me, that you can actually do the math affiliated with the construction loans without using your computer, with using instead just your calculator. All right? So, let's say we'll keep it relatively simple, but how much do you want your monthly construction draws to be? 75 what?
1,000.
Okay, so $75,000 a month in construction draws. Okay, what do you want your interest rate to be? 7.25% interest rate. All right, and how many months you want the construction period to be?
36.
12 months, okay? All right, so now the question is, how much do you owe the lender at the end of that 12 months under those conditions? Assuming that the first draw occurs at the end of the month. It's not complicated. Eduardo's looking at me like, no, this is really not. But it's pretty straightforward.
If the first is the end,
In other words, your first payment or your first draw is going to occur at the end of the first month.
one shift end.
Hmm?
One shift. So it's just solid for future value.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's all you're doing. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be 12 payments per year. And the payment amount is going to be $75,000. Your interest rate is going to be 7.25% interest. And in this case, your term is going to be 12 in for 12 months, and then simply solve for future value.
You wouldn't make that negative, the 75?
You could. Doesn't really matter for this problem. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Because you're accumulating basically $75,000 each and every month for 12 months, and then you're paying 7.25% interest on that each and every month.
Yeah, if you do 12 payments a year and 12 numbers, isn't that 144 payments?
Oh,
Well, yeah.
no,
That's fine.
no, that's right.
Because you'd
You have to be thinking for a second. No,
in-
12, not 12 shift in, 12 in. That's only 12 months.
Or one shift end, right?
You come
Or one shift in,
Yeah.
either way. So you got? Okay, so let's just, once again, just for fun, do the simple math. 75,000 times 12. It'd be $900,000 in total draws. So basically our interest cost over that period, $30,516.80. Okay, make sense? Yep.
say hypothetically that the first payment will be at the end of the second month.
That makes it more complicated. Then we have to set up as a series of cash flows. And we can do that.
Well, we don't.
No. Hold on. No, this is a very good teachable moment on this specifically. So what if, instead of these being fixed payments, what if they are, like the Excel example, they're variable amounts each month? Well, you're doing them as cash flow, but think about this. We're not solving for net present value. We're in essence solving for net future value. So how do you get that number? Yes, you take the NPV, once you've got the NPV, and you put that in as your present value, then you put in whatever the interest rate was in the term, and then solve for future value, and that's going to give you your net future value. So that would be the way to accomplish what you've proposed. Okay? One of the sort of subsequent versions of financial calculators that HP produced, one of the more advanced versions, actually has a net future value function. This one doesn't, but it's, once again, fairly easy to solve for. And it's very seldom that we probably end up using that in real estate except for construction loans, which you're probably going to use Excel for anyway.
I was just thinking, because the spreadsheet actually you talk about the interest cost, date on the end of the second month.
Yeah, so in other words, the month on for that first month, the interest on that doesn't accumulate until that following month. Okay? Okay, any questions? Good? All right. What are holdbacks?
Milestones. Milestones?
Okay. Set usually by who?
Well, the lender wants to make sure that you're using the money, like, for whatever reason, if it's like, they usually have, like in different countries, they have groups, like they say, when you do a third floor, we'll give you this payment.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, as you're saying, sort of milestones that until you reach that particular milestone or that particular achievement, that particular whatever, you're not going to get your money. And so we're going to hold it back until you reach that point. So the lender, I'm sorry?
Control risk.
It controls risk. So from the perspective of the lender, the whole idea behind the holdback is it's a way of helping the lender to control the risk and to minimize their risk for the project. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a simply nice little conceptual thing to lock in. Okay, moving forward. All right, one of my favorite little topics are option contracts. Specifically using option contracts for land assembly. So this is kind of one of those things that if you're doing large-scale land development, meaning that, you know, historically this is whenever you're like trying to assemble land for an airport, or you're trying to assemble land for a big shopping mall, or trying to assemble land for a major residential subdivision, or whatever, chances are you may have to buy multiple parcels of land and combine them, okay? Simple concept, but yet not so simple necessarily in reality, because usually one of the big problems that you face is the holdout, okay? The person who, you know, in essence says, I want to sell, or I want to sell at a ridiculously inflated price. And so what, you know, in a lot of cases will happen as a matter of practice, and this is certainly the case historically, now it's certainly becoming a lot more challenging to be able to do this. And that is, let's say that I am, you know, multi-billionaire sort of developer, and I decided I need to acquire, you know, several hundreds, if not thousands of acres of land for my new, whatever it is, airport, shopping mall, you fill in the blank. And all of a sudden, I, in my name, go out there and start trying to acquire these parcels, immediately you know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to see, okay, billionaire buying up land, let's raise the prices to ridiculously high levels and preclude them from being able to assemble what they need to assemble. So instead, more than likely what I will do, or historically I would have done, is I would have hired a whole bunch of basically land assembly people, have them all sign confidentiality agreements, and each one of them would go out in some sort of a pseudo name, pseudo interest, and start quietly assembling these parcels of land. So you would maybe get parcel number 1, parcel number 2, parcel number 3, 4, so on and so forth. And then once we kind of quietly had assembled these, then we're good to go to be able to put them together. Now, but as part of that process, we still want to try to minimize our risk, because we don't inherently want to go out and necessarily give full cash payment for each of those parcels until we know we can fully assemble all of them, okay? Because we don't want to be left in a situation of where, we've put out potentially millions of dollars buying this land, only to find out one of the key pieces of land that we really need, we can't get a hold of for whatever reason. So we usually have to structure these things, where we have like an option contract, an option to purchase, whether it's over 6 months, 9 months, a year, depending on how complicated we think those acquisitions are going to be. But from our perspective, yeah, we potentially maybe want to acquire these as quickly as possible, because once adjacent property owners start talking amongst themselves, they're going to be saying, well, did you get an offer for your land? Did you get an offer for your land? And all of a sudden everything sort of bubbles up, and it becomes to be problematic for the land assembly folks. So and what we're sort of talking about, here's the parcel of land that we need, but as we were sort of saying, we've got parcel A, parcel B, C, maybe D, and E. And so with those option contracts, we might be able to go in for 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 3% of the overall value of that piece of land, and say, look, we're going to give you this dollar amount to tie up your land for the next 6 months, 9 months, year, whatever, but you're going to guarantee you're going to sell it to us at this price within that particular period of time. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, once again, if let's say, I'm using you guys as the brokers for the deal to acquire land, but let's say Marielle is one of the landowners. Do you necessarily want to, tie up your land, and preclude it from being sold for the next 6 months, 9 months, or a year? Probably not. I mean, unless you're going to get paid, substantially for doing so. And is giving you 1% of the value up front necessarily sufficient? You've got to make that determination, and what are you going to make that determination on? You're going to make that determination on how buoyant maybe is the market now, and maybe kind of what you foresee within the next several months. If you've got no offers whatsoever for the past, several years, and all of a sudden this one just sort of pops up out of nowhere, you might be more inclined to just simply say, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take the money and agree on a price and potentially, sell it to you within, 6 months. But if there's been a lot of activity, there's a good chance that, that option price, if you will, is going to escalate. Okay, does that make sense? Any other factors that you think would sort of drive that option price? The price that you're going to pay to get the right to be able to buy the land. We sort of, number one, the underlying value of the land.
Right.
Number two, probably the length of the option. In other words, how many days or how many months do they have to basically take it off the market? Also, you're probably going to be looking at things like the volatility of the market in terms of how much sort of, in terms of price swings have there been, on land prices historically. What else might you consider?
I mean, obviously the size is square footage.
Yeah, sure, that should be inherent though
Yeah.
within the underlying value of the land.
How about the quality of the land?
Yeah,
Class type?
I'm sorry?
Class type?
Yeah, possibly, if it's just being used for agricultural versus, it's actually maybe prime, infill land.
That's all relative to value, right?
Sure, but at the ultimate, at the end of the day, yeah, the underlying value
Value
is.
is time.
But part of what you're going to be also sort of considering is, well, what is the current market value? But you would also probably want to consider what might be the market value at the end of the option period. Because if it's worth $50,000 an acre today, it might be worth $60,000 6 months from now. And so to what extent we would want to maybe factor that into the pricing of that option. I'm saying all of this not to try to make it more sophisticated than what it inherently needs to be, but if Mariel is a rational, owner, she is going to probably at least inherently try to take some of that, into consideration whenever saying what is she willing to agree to, in terms of that upfront option price. I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, now you could also just kind of be completely crazy and say, yeah, I want, a much, much higher percentage than any of that would even lend itself to, but then that could potentially drive the developer away. And just sort of depends on, well, how badly she wants to sell it or if she wants to sell it at all.
Could you structure it after the first 6 months, you could raise the percentage, like you can actually get more?
Possibly. I mean, you could have like, an extension on the option period that, if we don't buy within the first, 6 months, we're going to give you an extra percentage or an extra dollar amount, at the conclusion of that. I'm just, sort of just throwing some of these things out there because these are these things that you should be aware of. Okay, so. But the whole idea behind the option contracts is you're going to use these whenever you've got multiple owners involved, whenever you're trying to do large-scale land assembly. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, moving forward.
You also use an option contract to process the land through a zoning.
Yes, that's another. It's a good point. You could say, all right, I want to buy your land. Your land is currently zoned for agricultural use, but it's worthless to me as agricultural. It's only valuable to me if I can build houses on it, or I can build a shopping center or industrial building, whatever. And so I'm going to engage with you a 120-day or whatever option contract that contingent on rezoning. And if either I or you can get the property rezoned within that particular period of time, here's the amount that I'm willing to pay you. And that's a common practice. Now the question is, who takes on that responsibility of the rezoning? In some cases it's the developer, in some cases it's the landowner.
Yep. Usually the application is on the name of the owner, right?
Right, the application can be the name of the owner, but the point being is the developer may be the one paying for it, driving it, or pushing it along, because the owner may say, I don't really care. I'm happy with it being agricultural. Because I'm doing whatever farming I'm doing on it. I don't really intend on, developing anything on it. So you're coming to me saying you want to do all this stuff, well, then pay for it. Okay? Okay. So one of the things that a lender may require you to have in place whenever you're doing possibly a project that has multiple sales of multiple units, whether they're condominium units, whether they're single-family residential units, whether they're individual out parcels, maybe for a retail facility, so that, and what I mean by that is, like, for example, you've got a plot of land, you've got a retail strip center with maybe 3 tenants, but then you've also got out parcels maybe that are restaurants or banks or Starbucks or something like that. So a lender may put into place this thing called a release schedule that allows you, as you sell off different bits and pieces of this overall parcel that they have lent you money on, then they will, in essence, agree to a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage of the value of that underlying loan to be paid off and to be, in this particular parcel, to be released for sale. Does that make sense? So, in essence, think of it like this. When you bought this parcel of land, you bought the entire parcel. Maybe this is kind of just the opposite of the option contract thing. This, you bought the entire parcel, but yet you're really, for all intents and purposes, you're subdividing it at least into 5, if not 6 different ownership structures, okay? In other words, you're potentially selling off maybe this part of the shopping center, so A, B, and C are gonna be sold off, and you're gonna sell off D and E, but you may also, and this kind of gets to your point from earlier, you may even have the parking, especially if it's paid parking, to be sold off in a different entity as well, or owned by a different entity, all right? So if that's the case, as you go to sell off A, B, and C, D, and E, one, could make the argument that at least with A, B, C, D, and E, those are the rentable pieces, and if we're saying they're all the same size, then you could say the release provision would be, for each of those potentially could be 20% of the overall value. Well, but is it really 20% of the overall value? One could make the argument, well, you're leaving out the land value affiliated with the parking, and are all 5 of those parcels, A, B, C, D, and E, equal? Is there one that maybe is worth more than the other? For whatever reasons. It's more visible, it's more accessible, whatever, okay? And so the lender, usually before you ever get to the point of actually selling off the individual parcels, will establish with you, the developer, up front, what is going to be the actual release schedule in terms of saying that if you sell off parcel A, you've got to get X number of dollars or whatever for that parcel, and then that will then allow us to release that parcel. Like, for example, if the overall value of all pieces is maybe, I don't know, $1 million. That's the loan that you've got on the land, let's say. And the developer, or and so the release schedule might be something like this. It could be, you've got to get $250,000 for this one.
So the lender's setting a minimum price per
In
parcel?
essence, to a certain extent, yes. And so what you're actually seeing here is if you were to add up each of those 250,000s, the total would be 1.2 million or 1.25 million.
Right.
And so the lender is basically saying, once you've sold off the first 4, I know I'm going to be paid back. Okay? And then that 5th one, and then if you also include the value of the parking, and that's extra sort of gravy on the thing. But what the lender doesn't want to get stuck with is, like, what if the lender didn't have any sort of release provisions, and you were to just simply sold each of these parcels for $100,000? And you'd even sold the land for the parking. Well, in that case, that would have only totaled up to $600,000, and the loan on the land was $1 million. The lender wouldn't be very happy with that.
Well, how could I?
But my point being is, if the lender did not have
A release schedule.
a release schedule, that's how it could happen.
Right.
Is that you're basically selling off bits and pieces that once you maybe sold off everything, doesn't really come up to the full value of what the actual total project is. Okay.
We had a project in Virginia, had 40 different parcels, 3 buildings, parking garage. That was it.
There's no recourse.
So as you sell it, as you sell the property, the payoff schedule ensures that as the owner, we get our share of the profit,
Right.
not everything goes to paying to the loan. And then once you pay it off, then they redo a new release schedule based on where the loan is at that particular time with the remaining parcels, and they have base numbers and so
Yep.
forth.
I mean, it can get really complex, in terms of how to set this up, but as a general rule, the whole thing is, this is set up so the lender can release any sort of a lien, L-I-E-N-S, any sort of a lien or liens on those individual subparcels of land, okay? Does that make sense? All right, moving forward. All right. So we're going to, once again, sort of force you into doing some basic calculations on project feasibility. So let's say that we've got a project and you have determined that the minimum rent that the project needs to generate is how much per square foot per year?
130.
Okay, $30 a square foot. Is minimum rent, okay, required, all right? And assume that, how big is the project? How many square feet? 15,000?
Is that per year?
Yes, per square foot per year. 15,000 square feet is the building, all right? And in this case, my math here before I set this thing up. So let's say that the current rent is $35,000 a month. Okay, so given those three variables, is this project feasible or not feasible?
Yeah. Current rent is less than what's being.
Okay, we're saying that it needs to generate $30 a square foot in minimum rent. It's 15,000 square feet in size, and the current rental rate is $35,000 a month. Is the current rental rate. So we're asking whether that's feasible or it's not feasible. Okay, so what are we going to do to determine that? We're going to take the 35,000, multiply it by 12.
Divided by 15,000.
That gives us $420,000 a year of actual income divided by 15,000. That gives us $28 per square foot per year is what it is actually earning, and we need it to earn $30 a square foot, so it is not feasible for our investment purposes. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Project internal rate of return. All right. How much do we buy a building for?
100,000.
Okay. We bought it for 100,000. All right. How long do we hold it for? How many years? 20 years. Okay. And what are we going to sell it for at the end of 20 years?
122.
All right. And what sort of a rent is it going to receive on a triple net basis. Well, 18 what? You want to do it monthly? Or you want to do it annually? So what sort of a rental amount might we do on an annual basis?
$15,000?
Okay, 15,000. Okay. Figure out what the basically the rate of return is on this. Get no solution, you didn't put something in as a negative. Keep in mind, if you're paying for the building up front, that's going to be a negative. Everything else is going to be a positive. It's all income.
I did it the other way, but it's still the same math.
Okay? Make sense? Okay. Okay.
Go back, David?
Sorry?
Did you go back? I didn't finish right now.
Ah.
Now we know which built it. It's really Candy Crush.
No, no, that's mine. Oh, shoot.
Netflix and chill.
Actually, I've never played any of those, honestly. Does that matter? Okay. All right, project NPV. All right, so now let's say that we're going to buy a building, and how much per month is it going to generate in net operating income? Give me a dollar amount. 30,000. Okay, $30,000 a month in net operating income. All right, and we're going to assume it's a triple net lease. And how many years are we going to hold it?
5.
Why does everything always have to be 5?
It's 8
Let's make it
years.
something else. I don't care. 8 years. All right. All right, and what sort of a cap rate are we gonna sell it at?
6%.
6% cap rate. At end of year, basically 8. All right, and what sort of a discount rate are we gonna use on the cash flows? Okay, 7% discount on cash flows. Okay, so what I want you to do is to calculate the NPV. Payments per year. All right, so let's, this is going to be kind of a two-parter. We can do it a couple of different ways. The first thing we're going to need to do is figure out what it's going to sell at the end of 8 years, okay? So you're going to take the 30,000 times 12, okay? 30,000 times 12, 360,000. So that'll be NOI, all right? And then that's going to be divided by a 6% cap rate. So it's going to be $6 million is going to be the sale price. Okay, everybody cool with that? Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, now what we've got to do is we can put in, just very simply, put in 30,000 as our payment. So it's going to be a consistent amount. 8 shift in, be 96 months, yep. Then we're going to put in, we're going to put in the discount rate of 7%. And we're going to put 6 million. As a future value. So now the question that we're asking is, how much is all of that worth to us today, or how much would we be willing to pay for all of that? So we're going to be solving for basically present value. Okay? That's going to be the simplest way of working. More complex way would be to set up as cash flows, and you know, but this is much simpler. Okay, what do we get? 5,633,262.16 round. Okay? So they're not present value. Now, what if we were to reduce the rental income, meaning you reduce the NOI by a certain percent, like we reduce it by 10% a year, okay? what impact is that gonna have on our present value? To go down, but what dollar amount is it gonna go down, okay? So we're gonna reduce, this is gonna be the sort of the next problem, this is gonna be sensitivity analysis to see what actually happens if we change this. So in essence, 10% reduction in NOI is gonna be what, per month?
The
$3,000 a month. So that means that 27,000 is going to be our new NOI. If we have a 10% decline in NOI, that means our new NOI is going to be 27,000.
So your future value will change to them.
Yes. So we'd have 20,000, 27,000 that would go in there, and then our future value would now be $5,400,000. Okay, meaning our present value is going to be so we lost not quite $600,000 worth of value as a result of basically that 10% decline. And now we could also sort of say, well, what percentage of our decrease would that be? So we took the 5069 and divided it into the 5633, 262, 16. So basically it works out to be about, this ends up being 10% less than the present value. So it's, and I guess my point being is, with a 10% decline in income, we end up with basically a 10% decline in the overall value as well, okay? All right, make sense? Well, it's actually
9.00.
yeah. It's pretty darn close. But,
So what
okay.
you divided
Yeah, just dividing this into this, but I mean, the point being, the dollar difference between the two, if we actually, that's what, if I'm asking you that, 5633, 262, 16 minus 5069, 935.94, so a difference of 563,326. Okay? Roughly 10%. Okay? Okay? Any questions? Yep. Well, that's the last topic, so logically the quiz will go out. Okay.
by the numerator.
Number divided by the largest number multiplied.
Okay. So, here is the quiz coming out. And I'll give you your answer sheets back here in a minute.
The first question for how much land you need? Do you want that displayed in acres or square feet?
You just figure it out.
Oh, wow, the very last one.